Welcome to First State Kopites, a podcast for Delaware's Liverpool supporters and their friends.
Episode 10 of our fourth season. I'm Paul, and I'm joined today once again by Daz, who's in Baltimore, and Sean, who's somewhere in Delaware. Yes, I was about to continue our conversation that we were having before we started recording. Let's not do that. So, where are we? It's not been a good week for lots of reasons. If you're listening to us, this is the day before we play Ajax. The game against Wolves was cancelled because the Premier League decided that no games should be played in honor of the death of Queen Elizabeth II. We're not going to comment on that. Safe to say, we are going to talk about the games that preceded that. So we were going to do an episode, but it was holiday weekend, so we've sort of missed the Newcastle game. So we will start with that. We're going to talk about the Everton game in part 2, and then part 3. We'll touch on the Napoli game, although given Jurgen Klopp said that's the worst game they've played under him, we may not want to dwell on it as long as we might. And then we'll finish up with maybe a couple of thoughts about Ajax. At the time of recording, we just learned there's no game next weekend against Chelsea, so our next league game won't be till Brighton, I think, which is October 1st. So with that introduction, cast our minds back to what appeared to be a season-defining win against Newcastle, with Fabio Carvalho scoring in the 98th minute of the 5 minutes that were added on, which I'm sure we'll get into. Kind of Newcastle's interesting use of the clock. Daz, I'll start with you. Jurgen said, "I enjoyed the win, but we should have played more football."
Yeah, I saw the stat that you put in the agenda there that apparently we only played 49 of the available 98 minutes.
Yep.
That's unacceptable. I have look, and I think we mentioned this before, from a spectacle point of view, if you're paying top whack to go and see a game, you'd like to see at least 2/3 of it actually played on the field of play. I understand injuries. I appreciate that shithousery and time wasting is all part of it to slow down rhythm and momentum and all the blah 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 myriad reasons. I don't like it. I don't like it when we do it. Like, look, you can do it in I guess incrementally to give yourself a break. I do appreciate that. I've played enough to know that like sometimes like someone goes down like and they're not really super injured, but 2.5 minutes. How long was Pope down for? Like that was down for like a full 98 seconds or something like that, wasn't he? Or
I think they said it was the same length of time that was added on between the 95th minute and
the 98th.
And the corner being taken.
Yep.
So I think there was some kind of poetic justice.
At the risk of being non-traditionalist here, look, I think that everyone talks about like the spirit of the game. I think that one of the best parts about most sports is like you don't have to sacrifice or exercise the spirit of a game by adding something to it or taking something away. You could draw larger inferences. I can say it was like, well, back in the old days, you weren't allowed substitutions, and that's why Jerry Byrne played with a broken clavicle for 60 minutes. Because he couldn't come off because he couldn't put anyone else on. The game changes, and oftentimes it's for the better. So I honestly think, and I know I'm using up my time here very tangentially, but why not add like a shot clock behind each goal? And as soon as the goalkeeper picks up the ball, 15 seconds starts ticking down. And at the end of that 15 seconds, he either gets a card or the possession changes inside the box with an indirect free kick. They'll stop fucking doing it. Yeah. I guarantee you they'll stop doing it. And again, that way you're not really interrupting the flow of the game. Injuries is a little bit different, I understand, like, but because you as a schmuck watching the game or as a referee, you can't dictate like, it doesn't look like that serious of an injury, so get up, or I'm gonna give you a card. But I think that there are ways for them to the same thing. It's like on a throw-in, you get 15 seconds. And after that 15 seconds, possession changes. They'll stop doing it. Like it just sucks that you kind of have to add things like in this to stop the shithousery or the flouting of the rules, because it's clear that the referees aren't going to do it. But anyway, it was a great win against Newcastle. I think Klopp, I'm not necessarily don't think that Klopp was talking about playing more football in terms of the length of the time that the ball was on the pitch. I think he probably means about the way that we actually played too. We could have potentially played more football or better football.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the really hard things when you're struggling for some rhythm, which I think we can all agree that Liverpool have been probably since the Palace game. You know, and I know people have kind of glossed over that and said they've been terrible all season, but I do think they played some pretty decent football against Palace and were unlucky not to win. But certainly the rhythm's gone, and when teams are taking so much time out the game, I particularly enjoyed the Eddie Howe quote, which said, "I don't know where the added time came from. I would need someone else to guide me." I immediately went to his comments about needing to be educated about Saudi Arabia. Let's be hope then he's not using the same people to educate him, otherwise he won't realize that. And this is something Newcastle have done in all their games, by the way. It wasn't just against us. The ball's been in play for I think it's actually 49 minutes is the average of all their games. So it's not, they're not just doing it. They didn't just come to Anfield and decide to do it against us. And clearly that probably says something about their fitness. But anyway, enough on time wasting. Although there was really joyous to score a goal in a minute that was added on because they were time wasting. Sean, what did you make of it?
I was just going to say, I think the average in terms of ball and play is something like 56 or 57 minutes in recent years, which is stupid. It should be higher than that, but 49 is still a big percentage lower than that. So like they're spending, whatever, an additional 8 minutes or whatever, time wasting basically. But I didn't think we played great. We, especially in the first half, and then it seemed like once Isaac scored and we made some subs, we started playing a little better. I think part of that was that they intentionally started dropping deeper and wasting even more time after they got the 1-goal lead. So it was nice to get the win at the end. But yeah, I mean, again, I don't think we played great, but the time wasting, it just gets out of control. And under the current rules, the referees can just card the goalkeeper earlier in the match. I mean, there's no rule that says they can't card the goalkeeper for time wasting until the 80th minute or whatever. Like,
yeah,
and that's not the only place where they're time wasting, but it'd be the easiest thing to fix. That, happens once in the first half or a couple times in the first half, you warn them. Next time they do it, you card them, and then they won't do it anymore. Yeah. But they just allow it to go on for whatever reason. So,
well, it's clearly been recognized as an issue about time in play, right? Because they've done this thing. There's a name for it where they've got multiple balls around the field, and that's done nothing. It would appear, based on what I've read about the stats. In fact, it's given teams the opportunity to toss a couple of balls on the field and slow the game down a little bit more.
They did it in the Newcastle game as well.
Again, they did. I remember them doing that.
The corner.
Yeah.
Well, actually, let me amend what I said earlier. Is like if a player goes down and he's on the deck for more than 30 seconds, he has to spend 2 minutes waiting to come back in. Like you put him on a clock, and if he's down for more than 30 seconds, sorry, mate, you can't come back in for another 2 minutes. So like it's like if you have to give someone else the advantage, people will stop doing it.
Yeah. Or sub them off, or use a sub and sub them off. Like one or the other. But I agree, Daz. I think like they got to start doing something like that because it's not enjoyable for anybody. I mean, maybe it's enjoyable if you're a Newcastle fan, like you think it's going to help you win, but it's not good for the game.
Well, 1-1 would have been a win for Newcastle because you remember they were carrying some pretty significant injuries as well, so that could be part and parcel of it as well. But again, as a spectacle, so the argument could be is like people might not care about the spectacle as long as there's some sort of benefit for the shithousery, and in that case, that point would have been worth it for them.
Yeah.
Although Isaac, it was very, very close to getting a second goal.
It was. Yeah. I mean, that's the irony, right? That when they had the ball, they actually looked quite dangerous. They had the ball in play longer, they might have scored more goals. Yeah. So, if we want to say anything else about Newcastle, but it was very sweet to score that goal in the 98th minute because of the annoying behaviours and the and we don't need to mention the ownership again. Oh, never mind. Okay, we're going to leave it there with part one, and part two we're going to come back and we're going to talk about Everton. Hey, welcome back to part two of First State Kopites. We are going to talk about the Everton game, which is just over a week ago now. Everton 0, Liverpool 0. As we talked about in the Newcastle game, Everton kind of at one point looked like they had stolen this with a rare Connor Cody goal, but fortunately for us, it was ruled out. I mean, there were aspects of the performance I thought that were quite good. Although we had quite a reasonable XG, I think it was 2.9. I don't think we had many big chances, and I was a bit disappointed that Klopp's message at the end, and I'll go to you again, Daz. Klopp's message at the end was very similar to the Champions League final. You know, we had good chances, and you know we should have won, and their goalie made lots of great saves. But there was a spell in that game I thought we were absolutely awful. When Milner came on for Trent, it looked like I don't know. Well, I mean, it sort of, I guess it foreshadowed the Napoli experience with the amount of space in the middle of the field. Daz, I'll go to you. Your perspective on the Everton game.
It was a tough 0-0 loss. And again, I think we could probably say that we've had a couple of that 2-2 loss to Fulham was tough to take, as was the 1-1 to Palace, and it seems to be more of the same. Look, and I always say this when you go to Goodison, it's always like a nervy affair. They were up for it. They were buzzing around like blue ass flies, which is pretty much what they do, because that's all they can do, is just to try and spoil. And they did a very good job of it. Like I think that they did their homework. Frank had them well prepared. It didn't hurt that we were kind of still licking like smaller wounds than after the Napoli experience, I guess. But you can just see that we're off kilter. And look, I will say this: I think I love Jurgen Klopp, but I've been a fan for long enough and I've watched him for long enough to be able to point out some of his shortcomings. And I think that he's been getting his subs and his starting lineups a little bit wrong. I don't see. Look, you can say that James Milner has come on and done admirably for us in a right back position, but you're throwing him on in the middle of a derby, cold, in a position that they've been targeting anyway with their fastest player on the pitch, and you kind of left him out to dry. You could quite easily have shuffled Joe Gomez across and put in another central defender. There were other options out there.
He subsequently did, right?
Yeah, which he eventually did.
Yeah.
But it took him long enough and numerous chances enough to make that change. Look, I realize injuries are an issue, and I think that he's looking for some sort of solidity, for the lack of a better way of looking at it, because he knows what James Milner is going to give you a yeoman performance. But I just don't, and I'm not. I don't want to shit on players out of hand, but there's been enough of them out there that just seem to have lost their way a little bit. Whether it's they're mentally knackered, they're physically knackered, a bit of both. They just seem to have lost their way. Virgil doesn't seem to be the same player. Trent, for whatever reason, doesn't feel like defensive duties are any of his business anymore. And when it counts, again, I'm being very hyperbolic here, but it's glaring when someone that you used to being 7 out of 10 shows up with 5.5. It's a big step down, or even to a 6. Specifically when you're relying on those people to be the way forward. They are your beacons, your lights. That's what your guides, and we're just missing it.
Yeah.
And look, we did enough to beat Everton. I think. I honestly think that we did do enough. More clinical finishing. Bobby had a good opportunity to put right down the throat. As good as a game as Pickford played, they were all savable balls. It wasn't like what sounds kind of ridiculous, because if they weren't savable, they would have gone in. Yeah. But you know what I mean? Like they were all in his wheelhouse, even with his little micro arms. They were just that close enough to him that he didn't have to readjust too much to be able to make the save.
Yeah.
So it was just frustrating because I think that was there for the taking. We just weren't clinical enough.
Oh, well, I think that's absolutely true. I think the one save at the end from Salah, actually, which at the first look did not look like he'd actually saved it, was probably critical. And there were parallels for me with the Mane shot against Real Madrid, where the ball comes back off the post, and it's if it's us in a bad spell, it
goes off Ali's back and goes
the
in.
goalie goes in, right? Yeah. So yeah, so many things to say. Yeah. Do you think Pickford can actually kick the ball, keep within the field? Because I lost count of the number of times he kicked the ball straight out from his goal kicks.
I think at one point he was the leading assist guy.
All right. Oh, I think that, yeah, he probably was. But anyway, I digress. Not much. I haven't got that much time, and we certainly don't want to spend a lot of time talking about Jordan Pickford. So Sean, quite a bit to talk about, I think, and this bleeds into the Napoli game. It feels like a few different things that the numbers don't back up. Like it looks like Salah's not really involved in games. I think he's still the biggest chance creator in the Premier League in this season so far. It looks like Trent is not playing like he was. Like the Athletic did a deep dive on his numbers, and they're very, very similar to last season. What is not happening is that people are not turning in his chances, but he's not created as many big chances per game. And I thought there was a great piece this morning in the Athletic, written by Oliver Kay, where he talked about, like, everyone knows that there's space behind Liverpool's fullbacks. The problem is that now you can find the space behind Liverpool's fullbacks, whereas when they're playing really well, you just don't. And I think I felt like there was some truth in that. And a lot of particularly the Trent criticism, the Salah criticism, doesn't feel like it's supported by the kind of deep dive into the stats. Sean, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I think there's a lot going on. I guess the thing that's most troubling to me, and it sort of bleeds into the Napoli, is that it doesn't seem. It seems like there's something bigger. There are bigger problems, because I just don't. If you look at some of the statistics around, like, sprinting and running, like, we're not down like 10%. We're down like 40% with some players, and there's not really a good explanation for that. I mean, I don't find it. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a sports scientist, but I find it hard to believe that the explanation for that is that they're tired. That's too much. And so I don't know, so it's sort of speculating a little bit, but I have a hard time understanding how, you look at players like Trent and Virgil especially, and they're just not. It doesn't look like they're putting the effort in. Like there's something else wrong there, and I don't know. Maybe they feel like they're being asked to do more than they feel like they should be. I mean, who knows? You could speculate all day, but in the Everton match in particular, it's a similar story to the rest of the year. We're getting a lot of shots. We're not creating a lot of very good chances, and we are giving up a lot of good chances on the other end. And our midfield's just wide open all the time to counter. And it seems like part of that is down to some new tactics. For some reason, Salah's stuck all the way out on the touchline by himself a lot of the time. I don't know what that's all about. I think that's a big part of the reason why he's been isolated, because I assume he's been asked to stand out there because he's, and I know, like, you look at some of the heat maps and other things, but, from the eye test, it's like he's not playing in the positions where he normally does. And, I think a lot of it has to do with players not being available. Like, we haven't had Thiago and Naby available to play that left-sided center midfield role. I think that's probably the biggest thing, but it's definitely not the only thing. It's not like you're going to fix everything. And I think, I think it will help, but, they're just, it seems like there are other issues going on that we don't know about yet. and hopefully they get it sorted out. But I, don't really have a good explanation as to why. I mean, we at the end of the day, we had a similar XG to Everton. They had one really good chance that Mopé missed. We didn't really get any great chances. And so, we're just struggling. I think Klopp has talked about, we're not closing down the pass quickly enough, which is leaving our high line vulnerable.
Yeah.
And then I personally, I think the most obvious issue is that left center midfield role, we just don't have anybody playing that role properly right now. Just my opinion. We need somebody with the skill set of like Naby or Naby might not even play for us again, but Thiago or Arthur, Curtis has played there, So I think part of it is that we need to get the right players back. But it seems like there are other issues going on too. Hopefully they can get them sorted out.
Yeah,
I think Sean, I think you might be right. I think that it's when people kind of throw their hands up and like we're not sure what it is. I think there's a number of different like layers to it. They're kind of all caving in on themselves, and we're just seeing kind of like the rubble that's left over at the end at 90 minutes. And Justin talks about this a lot as well, and I think that enough talking heads have said the same thing. Is Klopp very early in the season intimated that he wanted to become more unpredictable. Mm-hmm. And I think this core group of players has spent basically the last 4 or 5 years to varying degrees, depending on the personnel, playing exactly the same way. And Klopp had almost no time to prepare them for what I think he's trying to change. And I wonder if that's why we're seeing so many gaps, is people are questioning what they should be doing or where they need to be. And once I think Sean Rogers of the Anfield Rap showed one of those, it's a still, so you take it with a grain of salt, but all three of our midfielders were in like 10 yards, or like 5 to 10 yards of one another. And there was acres of space on the left-hand side of the pitch. And that's what Napoli ended up exposing us in for one of the goals. I think that they're struggling to, I'm wondering if, like, to be kind to Trent, because I know he's taking pelters, because it's like numerous grammatical errors as a copy editor. Once you see the grammatical errors, you stop looking at the content, because you keep now you're just looking for the grammatical errors because you've seen them often enough. So, and I think that's what Trent has fallen afoul of, is you kind of expect him to do some defensive work, and I'm just not sure if he thinks that it's in his wheelhouse anymore. That because you've seen him as that inverted winger, as that number 8 often enough to assume that like it's like, well, maybe I don't need to get back. Or in the past, we were good enough in breaking up that 2v2 that he was an immediate outball as soon as we got the ball back and we're back on the front foot, and it's just not working. So, and I know that I often come down on him pretty hard just because I'm like that dad that just expects his son to be perfect at every turn, and because we're so used to it, and like we're just not seeing it. And I think a lot of it. What's that?
I think and Justin said this before. I think we're asking him to do too much. I think we're asking too much of him out of that role. I mean, you're asking him to be one of the primary playmakers and track back and cover. I mean, it's you have to ask him to do something that's reasonable. And I wonder if that's part of the reason he's just not trying half the time anymore, because he's kind of feels like he can't do it. Can't do what he's being asked to do.
I do think with and ask you both to comment on this. I do think there's Sean Rogers, kind of talking about him again, often used to talk about like who was at this, like certain players always seem to get the scene of the crime, but so they look guilty, but it often was about something else that had happened somewhere else on the pitch. And I do wonder how much of the I mean, Gomez made some individual errors, obviously, and we'll go on to talk about that against Napoli. But I do wonder how much of the defense not looking great is about just being out of sync everywhere else. I mean, I think all the things we've talked about could be in play, and there could be, we sort of speculated kind of outside the pod about, are there issues with Keita that's kind of, casting a shadow on the squad. But I do think that, and no, I've not heard this from anybody so forward, but suggest it's not true. But I do wonder whether just Diaz does not quite know what he's supposed to be doing. I mean, he looks great, so this is like really weird, right? And I do think that Elliott and him have generally looked quite good in most of the games they played. But I'm kind of wondering whether, as they're setting the press, he's not quite in the right place. and that's creating an imbalance everywhere else. Because there were times when we were playing really great where all our midfielders were on the right hand side at times when we were attacking, because that's what we had chosen to do in terms of overload. It just feels like that's now getting exposed because we've not filled in the gaps the way we would have done. And I'm certainly not saying, oh, we're missing Mane, but because he wasn't playing left. He wasn't playing left side forward for most of the second half of last season. But I do think there is an imbalance there that needs to be addressed, and it sort of feels even worse when Nunez is there right now, because it just doesn't feel like they're kind of synced up, which makes everyone else kind of look like they're at the scene of the crime, but not necessarily actually the cause of it. Thoughts?
Well, Diaz tends to be at his best when he's a chaos agent. If you think about when they took the shackles off him when we went down to 10 against Palace, he was here, he was there, he was every fucking where. And I think that's probably true of Napoli as well. When the best we looked was when he was marauding, and he basically created his own license, because I can't imagine Klopp was like, yeah, just go buzz. But I think because he wanted to make it more frenetic, you get the best out of him when that happens. But like you said, there's positives and negatives to that. As for him and Nunez, they literally speak the same language, so I don't think it'll be long before they figure it out. And because I think one of the points that we put in the later on was whether or not Nunez, the criticism that's being leveled at him by some corners, top reds, if the price tag is worth it, which is frankly ridiculous. The man's played 2.5 games in the league, and he's got 2 goals and an assist. Like, give him a second. It's going to take a while.
Cost less than Cucurella.
And he has better hair.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me at least, I think there are lots of issues going on, but I think that the most obvious thing to me anyway is that the midfield is just a mess. The left-sided midfield role, we don't have anybody that's playing that well right now, partially because we don't have anybody available that can play that role well. And then Harvey, like you said, I mean, Harvey's played great so far this year, but he's not really a midfield player. He's more of an attacking player. So then you literally, like, a lot of times you're just leaving Fabinho in midfield by himself. And so you don't have a platform to attack from, and you're not shielding the defense. I mean, the midfield's just not doing its job. I think that's the most obvious thing that's happening. I don't, other than injuries impacting the left side role, I don't know, kind of why all that's happened. I think with Diaz, I sort of agree with you, Paul. I think he doesn't necessarily have that overlap play down quite yet. We do that a lot, and I think he's still adjusting there. Nunez likes to drift out wide, which is fine if Diaz comes in, but I think they're still working that out a little bit. And I haven't specifically noticed this, but like, I know Salah's been playing way out wide, and I don't know if he's supposed to be interchanging with Harvey, and that's not happening, but like, that side of the pitch isn't really working very well either. So it's just, it's a combination of things that it's just not really working. But I think ultimately we gotta fix the midfield first, because we can't attack effectively and we can't defend effectively if we don't have a better midfield performance.
So I wonder if for Mo, sorry Paul, just something struck me about talking about Mo. There's maybe he's more of a confidence player than we previously recognized, because he dropped off a cliff, and I'll say that. I'll put it on a block there. I think that he fell off precipitously after there was the Cup of Nations and then the World Cup qualifying.
Yeah,
I just seemed to take all of the wind out of his sails. And you can say, it's like, the man played tons and tons of minutes. Maybe those lasers in his eyes have affected him long term.
I'm going to blame the lasers.
Long term, burnt his retinas out. But he's just, and like the way that the season started off, he just doesn't seem to be as hungry. And I wonder if that's got something to do with like the disappointments. Like, you like, the underlying stats are one thing, but the eye test is something different. like that one against Napoli when the ball was floated over the top front, he was by himself.
I knew you were going to go there, and that's why I was going to end in part 2.
Okay. Well, we can come to that in part 2. It just seems like some of the stuff that was routine for him is becoming labored. And that's what the eye test tells you, whether or not he's making, he scored 6 and 27 now.
Yeah.
It's
I think
got to be worrying.
One of the things is just kind of where his starting position is. And I think the notion is that he should be more where he was when he made the goal for Firmino. That's the intention. But we seem to be giving him the ball like out wide as well. More than
I think that's, I mean, he's not getting the chances that he got. And I think, frankly, I thought he started off really poorly after AFCON and World Cup qualifying, but I thought the last month or so he was starting to play really well again. And I think part of that might have been adjusting to Mane playing striker. This season, I don't know. Again, it seems like they're trying to do something tactically that's throwing everybody off on top of all the other issues. But he's not getting the chances. Bottom line, he's not getting the scoring chances he was, because they're like you said, Paul, they're giving him the ball all the way out, to the right of the 18-yard box. Like, what's he supposed to do with it from out there?
Yeah. Well, he's created a few chances from there, to be fair.
Well, he creates, right. He's been creating chances for others, which is the only thing he can do. Yeah. But we ought to be getting it to him in that right inside channel. I mean, that's where he always creates from. So, I don't know. There's a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, if you're going to speculation, like, Pep's book, like how what do the players think about that? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. You can go crazy with this stuff, but there's just something very off about everything.
So we'll end part 2, and then we'll talk about Napoli in part 3. But just to end it, Neil Atkinson made the observation that anyone who thinks that what he wrote in the book has given other teams an edge is fooling themselves, because any team worth their salt has probably got analysts who knew all this stuff anyway. So we'll leave part 2 there on that note and come back and talk about Napoli. Hey, welcome back to part 3 of First State Kopites. We're going to briefly talk about the Napoli game, and then we're going to go on and talk a little bit about the benefit of the enforced break, thanks to circumstances beyond Liverpool's control. They will play Ajax tomorrow night, but that looks like being the only game in the rest of September, which, given we were up for 2 games a week as far as the eye could see, that's quite a difference. So let's do a one round on Napoli. Let's start with Klopp said. So Sean, you asked me offline who were the 9 players who were not playing well. Klopp did not identify who the 2 who were playing well were, but he did say there were 9 players not playing well. And that second goal was not a good look, was it? It just felt like everyone was looking for somebody else to do something. What are your reflections? I know we started to touch on kind of Salah not looking great, and Diaz did look pretty good, despite what I said in part 2. What do you take away from
it? We were shite. I think I tweeted that this was probably the worst half of football that I've ever seen played under Klopp.
And he agreed. He said it was the worst game.
I said, like, look, can we change 10 outfield players for this game and then promise we won't make any subs for the home leg? Because we probably could have used an entire lineup change at that point. Look, my heart goes out to Joe Gomez. It was a horror show for him. He'll learn and he'll grow. I'm not gonna blast him out of hand. Although if you had caught me right after the match, there would have been pure vitriol flowing straight downhill, just discoloring screens across the entire face of the earth. But like with a little bit of distance and some time, like it happens. And sometimes like it compounds and compounds because you make a mistake, you try to get that mistake right for yourself within the way that you play, and you do the same thing over, and it just makes it look even worse. And then you start to second guess yourself. And I think Klopp was right to pull him out of the firing line. But he'll learn and he'll grow. He's a young player. You have to remember he's been off for a significant period of time. He's just getting back into form. So I don't think, there's no doubt in my mind that he won't come back stronger from it. But I don't think that Klopp will put him back into the firing line, at least in the center back position, for a little while. I could see him maybe taking up, depending on what he wants to do with the lineup and how he wants to play. He could take Trent's role if he's looking for some more defensive solidity. I think he might put him in at right back for cameos.
Yeah, just a thought. The previous worst performance, I think, was the 4-1 loss at Spurs, 2017. I think that was where he
was Lovren's horror show.
Hooked Lovren after 20 some minutes.
Yeah.
He played in the next game.
Interesting. Okay. Well, again, he's wiser than I am.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering. Lovren's a bit thicker than Joe Gomez, though. I think he does have the memory of a goldfish, so to his benefit. But as a professional athlete, that's definitely a benefit, as Ted Lasso would tell us. That philosopher. But yeah, we were shite. I don't think there's any two ways about it. And eye test and statistics, we were rubbish. And Klopp has promised a different. I think in his pre-match conference, he said he's promised a different type of game.
Well, I hope he's right, and we'll go on to touch on Ajax, but leave Sean the opportunity to have kind of the last word on Napoli. I thought actually the most interesting thing was his press conference afterwards, from my perspective, because there wasn't much in the game. I mean, the Diaz goal was impressive, but he said something about everyone can see what's wrong. It's obvious. And then people went on to speculate about what exactly he was talking about. I think he was talking about the compactness, because he mentioned that on several occasions. And he talked about needing to reinvent ourselves.
Yeah, not to single players out, but I think that
you're going to, though, aren't you?
I just think you can't comment on that game without pointing out James Milner's performance. Like, that was horrendous. And I don't really blame him. And the thing is, like, Klopp, like, what other options did he have to play there? You could throw Arthur in. He's never played a game for us. But I think you had Milner kind of all over the place. I mean, of course he puts in the effort, but wasn't really keeping the structure sound. And then you had Harvey playing his attacking role, and it just left us wide open. And Napoli are a very good team, and they killed us on it. And then on top of that, you had players like Trent, like, just not really putting in the effort that we're used to seeing them. And then Gomez, made the errors, and it was just all over the place. I mean, and I kind of feel bad for Gomez too, because they were two horrible errors, but the entire team was a mess, and so he's probably second guessing himself where to play the ball, and then they just nick it off him twice and get some easy chances. And like Daz said, I mean, he's still kind of just coming back from a long time off. But that was just a horror show all around. And it's hard to say much about the game after they went up and we made subs, but I've seen a lot of people, it wasn't just me, a lot of people were commenting that, like, as soon as Thiago came in, you could all of a sudden see just the structure come back a little bit in terms of, like, just having that platform for us to play from and shielding the defense just a little bit better. Again, they weren't trying to attack in the same way, and Osimhen went off, so it's not exactly apples to apples, but Klopp said it, like, everybody was pretty poor on the day, other than Ali. I think Allison made a couple good saves, saved the penalty.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to know, like, who the other person other than Allison that he thought had a good game. Maybe Diaz. I don't know. I mean, Fabinho had to cover the whole midfield himself too, basically. So I kind of felt bad for him too. But it's tough to pick out a good performance from that one. It was pretty bad.
So the Neil Atkinson and Sean Rogers were speculating that Diaz was definitely not one of the 9. and that the other one they thought might have been Andy Robertson, because all the goals basically came. Well, I think he was not involved in any of the goals in a way that some of the others were.
Yeah. Yeah, although I mean, I think Robertson's been out of form for most of this calendar year too. I mean, he's not. I think he's still putting in the effort, which is different than Trent. I think Trent just seems like I don't know, something's wrong there. He's just not trying at times. Like
so going to the numbers, because there's the article that talks about Trent's numbers being very similar. Robertson's are down in terms of his kind of creativity, and at least one of the excuses, and which maybe put the Diaz thoughts in my head, was he does not seem to have formed a very like if you look, I think one of you shared a passing network.
Yeah,
like, they're not like in sync with each other in the way that he was with Mane, for example.
Well, one of Robertson's biggest point, the biggest weapons in his arsenal was that overlapping run. And Diaz, natural inclination is to bring that inside and then try and curl it into the far corner. You see him do it time and time again. So I don't think Robertson's making those runs as much as he used to. And he's not putting them into the box quite like he did before. And you see him, and again, like our boys at the Anfield Rep pointed this out, often like there was a couple of times in the early games where you saw Robertson pop up in an inside left position, trying to ping shots on goal from on top of the 18-yard box inside the hash marks. So again, this could be by design. The design might just be half-baked, I think, is what the problem is, because Klopp never really got to really labor the analogy to cook it for long enough. So you're seeing kind of betwixt and between now, and I think a lot of people have kind of like, what the hell are we doing in this situation?
Yeah, I do think way too much of our system is relying on Thiago specifically. You know, and that overlap's a good point. Like, put yourself in Robbo's shoes. Like, if our left-sided center midfielder is on the other side of the pitch, well, you can't do an overlap run, or you can't even be an option. You got to stay back. And so it throws everything off if that, and we've seen it before, like the year where we didn't have center backs. One position is missing, it throws everything off in Klopp's system. So I think that's a big part of it. It's not the only thing, but I think that is a big part of it.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to see what life is like without Robbo because he's injured.
Yeah, and hopefully that's not a serious one. I saw mixed things today about it. One said it was a knock, one said it was his knee. So that's like pretty drastic extremes there.
You put the two together, it could be a knock on the knee.
A knock on the knee.
I think Tsimikas can do a job there, but ideally you want Robbo in there for his defensive ability.
Yeah.
But,
Tsimikas no slouch in defensive. The defense.
No, he's been good. I'm much more. I'm confident that Tsimikas can cover that role. At least in the short term, just hopefully it's not a long-term injury for Robbo.
So if your theory is correct, Sean, Thiago comes back and Tsimikas is going to look much better than Robertson did because he's got Thiago in front of him.
I wouldn't put it past it. And it seems like Tsimikas and Diaz have kind of linked together a little better anyway for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Look, they better have Thiago in that bloody Darth Vader tank right now.
Well, it certainly should give them some time to get Arthur up to speed.
Well, he's only got to play.
Put him in the same tank. Put him right next to him in the same damn tank.
He's only going to play one game.
Stephen Corker 2.0.
Hopefully they got him playing the left side role. They put him in at the right side, and I was like, what? Like, I guess that kind of makes some sense, but. Yeah. I thought the idea would be for him to rotate with Thiago.
Got to feel for Curtis Jones too. Like this is what his time to shine, and it's like that little stress fracture or that stress injury, and the muscle it's on the bone because of the muscle though. That's poor kid, man. Like he just can't win for losing.
I heard he's out for another 5 weeks, maybe.
Oh, what?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, are they hitting them with hammers over there?
I don't know. I don't know what the injury is, but yeah,
So the good news from all these postponements is that that'll give people more time to come back because Henderson was supposed to be back after the international break. That's what they said, right?
Yeah, the next time we play a game, Henderson's kid's going to be playing up front for us.
Hopefully it's not another, in the past there have been multiple players, but I know Henderson's been one of them where they say, oh yeah, he'll be back in 3 weeks, and then 3 months later he finally comes back. Hopefully it's not one of them.
Well, I did fear that the Thiago scenario was exactly that. I was
Yeah.
quite surprised when he was back, especially as he's the face of the calendar this month, and the calendar has been like. So the previous month was Jota, who came back on September 1st.
Oh, gosh.
So,
Yeah, I
so
mean,
we should be doing some praying if we're into that kind of thing for tomorrow and Thiago.
I do. I mean, to some extent, I think people are underplaying the impact of all the injuries. I mean, it's clearly not the only issue, but we saw what happened in 1920 when we had I'm sorry, the 2021.
Yeah.
All those.
But I think that's one of the reasons that we are undercooking it, is because we're like, oh, it's this old chestnut. So it's almost like that resistance fatigue type thing. You don't even mention it anymore just because you're so used to it being a thing.
Yeah.
Well, there'll be plenty more chat going forward, I'm sure, from Klopp about fixture congestion, because that's clearly going to be a thing now. 2 weekends.
You kick off, get on the bus, and play the next one as soon as you get off the bus. Yeah.
The only fortunate thing, if you want to call it that, for us is that we probably have fewer of our top players and starters playing in the World Cup than a lot of the other top teams. So they won't have all the miles in their legs. You know, theoretically, we should be more fresh later in the season.
Although, ironically, Firmino's just been called up again for the Brazil squad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he might not. We'll see how much he plays.
Yeah.
They got he's got a lot of competition there now.
He has. That was what surprised me with them.
Yeah,
calling him up. But okay, so let's look ahead to Ajax, and then we'll do one more round of sundry other topics. It's Ajax tomorrow. I thought I love this quote. Asked if the break could impact Liverpool's rhythm, Klopp asked, "Did you see our game against Napoli? If we could lose this kind of rhythm, it would be really cool." I particularly enjoyed that. Daz, Ajax.
Look, I'll take this with a grain of salt, but I watched a little bit of them against Rangers, and they were different class. I think the rumors of their demise have been greatly exaggerated, because I know that they've lost quite a few of their quote unquote blue chip players
again,
and they just seem to plug and play. They're a very cohesive unit. Let's put it that way. Well drilled. If we're not on our A game, I know that like a lot of people are chatting like, yeah, we should beat them. I'm like, I'm not putting that out there. I'm not by any stretch of the imagination. Not after how we've looked over the course of, let's say, the last 6 games in all competitions. So
yeah,
Bournemouth was an anomaly, but it was Bournemouth, and they fired their coach afterwards, and then subsequently won their next game. So I remain optimistic that this will be hopefully one of those watershed games, but we've had a number of false dawns. So, and again, like, it's when you get beaten enough, you're like, you just wait for the next beating, and you're like, yeah, well, I don't think we can be any worse. So that's a positive. And I think anything better. Unfortunately, we're in a situation now because of how poorly we played in the first game. And I think a lot of people said, like, yeah, we're okay with losing against Napoli. They're a good squad that's at home. We've traditionally struggled. But that does put a massive amount of pressure on this game.
Yeah.
And I wonder what Anfield's going to be like. If you get that cagey, nervy, anxious cop, like it's oftentimes trickles down to the players, and you see them start making bad decisions, or they play tight. So my hope is that it's just raucous for the sake of being raucous. Everyone shows up and just cheers the Reds on, and they play like we know they can play.
Well, there'll certainly be some frustration about not having watched them on Saturday, because I can clearly, had they played Saturday and not played well, then this would have felt even more challenging. My friend from Liverpool messaged me after the Napoli game. Not after the Napoli game, after the weekend when Napoli had won in the league before they played us, saying, "Oh, it's okay. Ajax have lost their manager and all their best players." I think we may need to revisit Erik ten Hag's credentials after the new coaches won every match they played up to now. So I think we're in for a challenging match. Did we beat them in the group stages 2 years ago?
Yes, we did,
without crowds. I think we were quite fortunate, if I remember correctly, to win the game at Anfield.
Yes, it was tight. It was a very tight affair.
Yeah. Did Curtis Jones score? Am I making this up? I'm just guessing now. Completely guessing. Do your research. Okay.
To the internet machine.
What's that?
To the internet machines.
Yes. I'll quickly check that. Sean, Ajax tomorrow. What would be the biggest hope?
That we look a lot better than we did against Napoli.
That might not be too difficult, but
I'm not. I can't say that I'm expecting a win, unfortunately, in this one. I mean, it just I'll be happy if we get anything out of it at this point, given how we've been playing recently. I think if we were on our game, I would have no reservations, no questions that we would, beat them pretty easily. But we're well off that right now. I'll be really interested to see what the lineup is, because we have some players back now. A couple of players are injured. I'll be interested to see like who starts between Trent, Gomez, and Matip. Be interesting to see who starts in midfield, and see if Nunez starts again. Be interesting. Yeah, I think that'll be interesting to see who Klopp picks for this game.
Yeah.
Like maybe not tell you something about what he's thinking about, different players. But I'm hopeful that we'll be, more compact and kind of defensively sound, and hopefully get the win. But given how we've played, I think I'd be happy just getting to the break and trying to sort all this mess out at this point.
So it's interesting that just going back to that game, December 1st, 2020. It was indeed Curtis Jones who scored the winning goal. It was 1-0. In the lineup that day, we had Kelleher and Nico Williams, and the back line was included Matip and Fabinho and Robertson, and we had Gini Wijnaldum playing in midfield. In their team, really interestingly, were Anthony and I'm looking at it. Oh, and Ryan Gravenberch, who went to Bayern.
Yeah, I was going to say Gravenberch.
And all the others, I think, still play for them. So not as much turnover as we might have imagined, I think. Anyway, there we go.
Yeah.
Fact checked. So Ajax, do you want to round it up, Daz, with picking on one of the topics that you talked about, whether it's Naby's future with the Reds, or is it kind of I know you mentioned earlier Nunez's the chat around Nunez.
What was the other one? It was one more, wasn't there?
Oh, you talked about is the extended break hurt or harm us? I think Klopp sounds like he's unequivocally help. It's about helping us to get out of the rhythm we're currently got.
I think it's worth touching on Naby.
Yeah.
I know that there's speculation is always rife around him. I don't think you have anyone that's Naby curious anymore. You're either a Naby file or a Naby phobe. And I think that I don't know. I just don't like drama in my life, which makes me wonder why I watch Liverpool. Maybe I like the pain. I don't know. I wonder if we will see him in a red jersey. I know that speculation again, like I said, is rife. Like he's being called up to the Guinea team, but Klopp doesn't seem to think he's going to be fit enough to go. I'd hope it's not this kind of agitating, like I want to go type stuff. I really hope it's not, but it's starting to sound more and more like it is. And you can hide behind the veil of like, well, he's injured all the time anyway, so it makes it a convenient out for the club to say like, oh, sorry, he's injured. And in the meantime, they're looking. Now, am I correct in saying he can go for free next year?
Yeah.
So how are we going to move him on, even if that's the case?
Mm-hmm.
And it hits January. Is January the window again, or they move it up into November because of the World Cup?
No, it's January.
Still January.
Yeah.
You'd think I'd know this, being a professional podcaster, but I don't. But so thank you for that. I just we wouldn't get a bag of chips for him because everyone would be happy to wait until until this contract is over and they'll pick him up for free.
and he'll be happy to do that too, because he'll probably get like higher wages wherever he goes, because they're not paying any type of transfer fee.
Yeah.
So like, if that's the case, that's always angered me. I think that Owen did the same thing, didn't he?
He did. Yeah.
Yeah.
And McManaman.
McManaman,
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's always, and the club seems to be happy to allow that to happen. How much did we pay for Nobby? I don't remember. It was a pretty decent chunk of change.
50 million, I think.
Yeah.
Million, I think, in the end. Yeah.
You get nothing for him is like, it just spells shit business from the club. And we've done it in the past, I know, but you could have moved him on when he said he wanted to go.
Yeah.
For something, because now you're going to get fuck all for it.
Yeah. So are we sure that he said he wants to go? Because he appeared about ready to play against Man United and then got injured like the day before, or they announced the injury the day before. That doesn't seem to jive quite with the, well, he's down tools and he's been injured the whole, they'll tell you he's been injured. Question.
We'll find out soon enough. I mean, Klopp, I think, said in the press conference today that he does not expect him to go on international duty.
Yeah.
So if he does, then I think that tells us something.
It would, especially as he's not in the European squad, right? And the only reason, or the only good reason he's not in the European squad is he's not going to be fit by the time we play our final round of games.
And Klopp was really careful in his answer on that too. He said, we had to make a decision. We were forced to make a decision, and so we did, is what he said about that. So you can read into that, whatever. Okay. What is that supposed to mean? Yeah. Like, is that because he's injured, or is it something else?
Do we have a limit on the number of homegrown players?
I don't think
that's
so.
Also part of this.
Well, we do, but I think that's just for the league. I don't think that's for Europe.
Europe has the same. It's different, but it has restrictions. This is why I think City didn't have a full bench for some of the Champions League games last season.
It could be, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm skeptical. I'm not sure we're ever going to see him play for Liverpool again, one way or another. It just seems like such an odd situation going on right now there, because what is the injury? Hamstring injury, I think they said recently.
Well, he was ill, then he had an injury. Yeah, so
so it's just all been kind of weird.
Well, Dortmund look crap on Saturday. So if that keeps on going, maybe by the time we get to January, then Bellingham will be able to leave. We can send them there.
I doubt it. Yeah, I doubt it. And I would just say on the Nunes chat, I don't think it's something to worry about. He's played like 3 games, and I think he's more of a long-term investment for us anyway. Yeah. We would have known he's pretty raw, and he's hardly played for us, so he's more of a project. But
we need great chances for him, right? That's
yeah. I mean, he's still he pops up in all the right spots, but I think he's just raw. We just gotta work with him a little bit more. It's nothing to be worried about. People comparing him to Haaland, it's just he's not where Haaland is yet in his development. So
yeah.
Well, it's also, I think that Haaland's worn a pretty big jersey already, whereas like this is probably the biggest that Nunez has put on so far. And I think once that pressure dissipates, you'll probably see him start scoring more freely, because he scored 4 in one game, and there were different types of goals too. So
yeah,
he can do it. I think it's just about what killed him was that Palace sending off.
Yeah.
I think he would have been probably would have been up to speed at this point. And I was surprised that Klopp didn't start him against Napoli, because he really didn't have much to lose.
Yeah.
Especially you got Bobby, who's played all those minutes, and he's just seemingly coming back into form as well. So I thought he would have played him myself, but I don't earn that type of money to be able to make those types of decisions.
Was it Everton where he had that Fernando Torres kind of volley?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that was incredible. That was going in. Pickford just decided to have, a great game that game for some reason. He made that save, and he made the one on Salah at the end. Both of those normally would have been goals. So
think we missed the ghost of Divock Origi.
Yeah.
Well,
Although he's
to
getting
18
a
around.
lot of criticism in Italy.
Yeah.
He's having a hard time.
Did I see him described as the worst signing of the
Flop of
transfer window?
the year. Yeah, they call him. Yeah.
Okay, all
6
right.
games in, Jesus! I see again. Give him a second.
Jeez. I watched a little bit of him. He had a cameo performance. What was it? Champions League last week, and I thought he looked okay, but
Yeah.
but
Okay.
we know what Divock is. Maybe
Yeah.
they thought they were getting some star player. I don't know.
Yeah, they're just using him in the wrong way, obviously.
Yeah, add more peril.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe he needs Jordan Pickford to get a transfer to Syria.
Bring your little arms.
Yeah.
Yeah, you save him for title matches, trophy matches, and late game heroics. When
Yes.
you sub and divvy.
Okay. It's never a bad thing to end on Divock Origi's kind of pressure on Jordan Pickford. It's a good thing. Okay. So we will be back. I think we'll be back next week. I don't know. We'll be talking about the Chelsea game. We will be talking about the Ajax game, though. And thanks so much today to Daz. I thank Sean for taking time to do this. Yeah, we'll be back next week. Hopefully with a more upbeat feel about the Reds. If you enjoyed the podcast, please share with a friend. Follow us at First State Kopites on Twitter. We only tweet and retweet from sources we think are credible. Finally, music is courtesy of Hypnotic. They're a Welsh electro-pop band, and you can find them at https://hyperfollow.com/hypnotic. Hypnotic is HYPENOTIC. Thanks so much to them.